Well, once again, we will enter into some small group time afterward, and we should have a healthy amount of time. And not saying we have to exhaust every minute there, but an opportunity to get together, to really coordinate. And I think it's time to like break down those roles, move forward, create the labor strategies, and then we'll this allows everyone. This has been the goal from the beginning, to perform some independent tasks. And we even have some of the students that are in online only versions of this class that kind of at their own pace, but they want to be a part of the larger group's media project, at least the multimedia project. And so thinking about how you can divide that labor, we're trying to function like an organization here. And that's one of our learning objectives, and is to kind of divide and conquer said labor. Well, we have been on a journey through the heist film genre, a genre that's unique and has its own distinguishing markers. Some consider it not quite its own genre, but theorists, academics like Darrell Lee, in one of the recommended readings for the course, he's formalizing an argument in Stealing with Style to try to situate the heist as its own genre and help explain how it functions in that way. Well, meanwhile, we're also trying to orient ourselves with an understanding of what the genre, what the heist element, is and represents in a film type format. And we have a 5-week accelerated path to explore some texts. And so for that reason, we're taking lots of twists and turns. As in week 1, we dropped right into the center of the genre, really at its apex, arguably, with Steven Soderbergh's Ocean's 11 in 2001, celebrating its 20th anniversary. Well, last week we did a historical retro screening. We backed up in time and considered some of the origins of the heist genre, and a lot of those origins intersect with a genre whose classical period has expired, and that would be film noir, right? Effectively, features that ran from about 1940-41 to 1958, that distinctly tended to be black and white, and center on darker themes, moody pictures, and really deal with some existential drama and even trauma in the American psyche. And there has been a case in recent years that a few color film noirs exist, or films noir, but that's a fun debate to have. And really, there is a healthy follow-up period that we can consider neo-noir, or even offshoots like future noir and stuff like that, right? You can just go down the rabbit hole and play with those ideas. Well, we're doing a similar thing here. We're looking at how the heist film functions and how it offers variations on its own form. And our goal is to really kind of sample from a number of different baskets creatively and even temporally. We're going to look, I don't think no two features that we'll sample come from the same year, and only 2 come from the same decade. So we looked at Stanley Kubrick's The Killing, and we had an excellent follow-up lecture cast discussion, myself and Scott McMurray, on The Killing and its role in the genre history. It should be available very soon for you to download and listen to. And just as we're processing these ideas and figuring that out, again, it's a learning objective, because we're seeking to learn about the genre so that we can apply it to one, if not 2, of our major projects in the course. And tonight we get to take on a much lighter tone from last week's darker picture, right? That kind of had that noir staple fatalistic ending, right, with a cynical worldview. And so tonight we are going to look at a relatively recent film, just a little over a decade old, but sometimes fell through the cracks of people that typically only take in quote unquote animated or family programming if it's produced exclusively by Disney. and we're going to look at something that was at least distributed by 20th Century Fox / Fox Searchlight, their independent label. This is Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox. You jumped in on this. Yeah. You just got done visiting it, but it's going to be all in your head here. But this is a feature from 2009, and if you're unfamiliar with Wes Anderson, he's a Texas native. But before you start like twirling your 6-shooters and polishing, your boots and spurs, he's more of the Austin flavor of Texan, right? A very, very quirky and eccentric filmmaker that has a lot of unique style all his own. If you've seen any of his films, we were talking about before class, some of his earliest work, films like Bottle Rocket, and these would be kind of built upon. I think maybe one of the first films that broke through in a wider sense was The Royal Tenenbaums, and I believe he and writing partner were nominated for a screenplay Academy Award for that film, and he's since returned to that that kind of prestige status on a number of occasions. With films like Darjeeling Limited. I'm going to start pronouncing things wrong. Darjeeling Limited. The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, and Moonlight Kingdom, which was a popular, and Hotel Budapest.
And Isle of Dogs too.
And Isle of Dogs, which was a return to animation. Absolutely. So. And has a new feature due that was delayed by the pandemic, The French Dispatch, that, by the way, scheduled to come out next month. So check that out, right? So if you like this, get out there and support a director that makes things that don't look exactly like the other things we tend to watch. So speaking of things we don't tend to watch that look pretty unique, let me break down some influences, some genre influences, where this feature comes from, right? Fantastic Mr. Fox, which was released by the Criterion Collection, which is a kind of like, how do I translate that? Like uber snobby film critic circles movie club edition in 2019. You have to wait till the 50% off sale, but I can't solicit or promote any things like that, right? I'm not getting paid by Criterion here. Although if they need some scholarly essays written, I'm waiting for that email. Okay, so let's talk genre influences. Fantastic Mr. Fox is a literary adaptation. This is an adaptation of a Roald Dahl work of literature, typically associated with children's literature, although sometimes he plays with slightly darker themes. But some of his most popular hits include not only Fantastic Mr. Fox, but James and the Giant Peach, which was kind of one of those just stamp it on your reading list in grade school works. So an author in his own right, no stranger to kind of whimsical things. Willy Wonka, or rather Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but translated into the film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Then Charlie 2, All the Chocolate, which a film that's celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, 2021. This author, no stranger to adaptations, and in researching the film, the director Anderson did go to great lengths to kind of establish and nurture that professional relationship with the Dahl estate, right? So working through and with his wife on permissions to adapt. And so what we're going to get here is a really unique form of storytelling and filmmaking that I bet you all haven't seen too often in your movie going experiences. And that's what we consider stop motion history. So let's say I didn't set this up in advance, I'd be willing to bet, based on how great our digital technology is today, a couple of decades into the 21st century, that if I just played it, you would start to kind of feel like you were watching some, a type of advanced Pixar, motion capture suit type of experience. But in fact, this feature is what we consider stop motion, which is an old-fashioned film technique used for the likes of classics like King Kong to an extent, right, which was a combination of live action and stop motion animation, and the iconic canon of Ray Harryhausen, which is just kind of a name, unfortunately disappearing in popular memory, but a film canon worthy of remembering and continuing on in conversation. And so it's just got a unique style to it, and style is kind of too broad a word, because that word can be shot in a half dozen directions with this type of film and this type of director. So let's talk about this auteur elements to the film, right? So we're talking about directorial influences, like the stylish quirks that kind of fit into many, if not most, of Wes Anderson's oeuvre. And so look out for symmetry in terms of his filmmaking technique. This is a very symmetrical director. Loves like Stanley Kubrick, although we didn't see it a lot last week in Kubrick's later works, a director almost essentially obsessive with symmetry in the film frame, right? And so you're gonna see some of that. A popular recurring theme, whether it's, as mentioned a minute ago, Rushmore, how did I forget, or the Geeling, or some of these features. This sense of existential doubt from the protagonist, who is, we'll spoil it, a fox. Okay, and what that means is very interesting. There is existential doubt, again, a popularized term that comes up in the essay that accompanies the Criterion edition. And so we want to think about how that folds into this idea of heist films, which I'll get into momentarily, but I'm planting the seeds for us now. Also, typography. Wes Anderson is definitely from that school of thought that is big on storyboarding. Okay, so Steven Soderbergh did not storyboard Ocean's 11. We learned Stanley Kubrick, actually his wife, illustrated his storyboards for The Killing, and then now we have someone that's absolutely all hands on deck, hands on in a literal sense, in terms of the way in which his features present themselves. And speaking of, this is something to look out for as a novelesque or novel style storytelling structure, which is a common trope in Anderson's film canon. And I think about, in particular, The Royal Tenenbaums and Grand Budapest Hotel as the other two, along with this one, that really stand out there in that way, for that novel style, like chapter type breakdown. Well, let's look out for techniques that we can be on the lookout to examine, things to keep in mind. Sound design. All right, here's a film that's going to benefit from voice work from a who's who cast. Maybe a familiar voice or two will poke their head up. And also be aware of natural sound effects. And it wasn't until I looked into some of the documentary features, and there was a feature on the voiceover elements, like filmed footage of their efforts, and they were doing the really risky business of filming the initial voice work in non-traditional settings, making live sound effects as they were recording the voice work. That's pretty gutsy. You don't get that as often. You get a lot of controlled sound in the industry usually. And I just found that impressive. I found it refreshing. And it also reminded me of what we're attempting in our projects. And sometimes we feel constrained if we don't have the best XYZ in the world to complete idea 1, 2, 3. But we have to let go of that sometimes and just have fun with the opportunity and the exercise. So
and then animating around the voice recordings. Instead of having voice recordings that the actors are matching, actually having the animators take the voice recordings and do the animation for voice recordings. That's really giving the lead to the actors.
And oftentimes, in terms of like the heavy role of Anderson, we'll talk about this more in our discussion this week, but he was a stand-in model for a lot of the way he wants shots to be presented, the way he wants character. He would read with his actors, right, when they're performing. And so this is very much a hands-on all the time, involved in this laundry list here. I mean, be on the lookout. Another director trope is strategic, quirky color palette, right? This is everything from set design to costuming, character design, and so on. This is someone with a vision every time he puts together a feature film, and the style is uniquely his own. The music, we talked about it being more of a fun romp as opposed to some of the darker tales we'll encounter in this course. And so be aware of the way that music lifts the narrative itself in terms of tone, in terms of mood, and maybe even some peculiar instruments, including is it called the nose horn or nose harmonica? It is in use, so be on the lookout. Like I'm finding things in this film that I'm not quite aware of or have seen in person. But here are some heist conventions and just ways that we're testing the boundaries. So if the heist film exists as a genre, what are its boundaries? And I think looking at these particular themes and kind of process these as you're watching, this idea of theft as lifestyle, or perhaps theft as compulsive choice, and maybe someone like Danny Ocean, fits that same category. So we're starting to collect these ideas of what people do, right? Theft as lifestyle is something we could probably apply to Johnny Clay in The Killing. And so we're looking for these narrative themes that can kind of create a continuity of the genre for us. The next one and these are isolated themes I'm picking out of my reading of Fantastic Mr. Fox, theft as natural or instinctual. Okay, this idea that a fox would wrestle with certain traits, right, inherent. And so what does that mean? And maybe what does it say about the genre, if anything? And then finally, I think loosely, lightly, this film plays with this idea of theft as justice, and maybe thiefdom as righting wrongs versus creating them, or collective versus individual experiences. That's something to look out for. This is a similar theme. This is a similar theme in film noir. It's a similar theme in the American Western, but individualism versus collectivism. And these are continuum themes because it's an ideological or value set that we wrestle with as Americans, is themes that toggle between whether we're more individualistically driven, or that is a quality for high character and achievement, or whether we're drawn to collectivism, right, which is a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of helping others. And so, finding characters and situations that toggle or kind of explore that tension is interesting in the heist film, and we may find something that this film has to say about that. Again, we'll look at Fantastic Mr. Fox from Wes Anderson, 2009.